Hi guys! This video I'm going to be talking about how I've implemented a rudimentary inventory system in our game. So this is how it looks like right now. You can press I to open it up and escape to close it. And then right now we only have one item that's being given, which is in this scene. But if we open up our inventory before, you'll see we have nothing. And then there'll be dialogue here later, but I press E and I get one test tube. And each time I press E, I get another test tube. So if we test this out and I click E 2 more times, I have 3 test tubes. And I can press E because I'm there. And you'll see that the number increases relative to the amount of test tubes. And now if I throw 1, 2 test tubes, you'll see that the number went down. And also, if you hover over it, text will pop up about the item. Right now, because we only have the test tube, that's all we have. But the way I've done it will apply to all the other items, so there'll be text as well. So that's how the inventory system looks right now. So let's take a look at the code. Here's the inventory itself. Basically, the way that I've done it is that the inventory background is stored in a texture rect, and then there's a grid container where I have controls positioned for each of the different inventory boxes right in the center. And those are basically how I've kind of left like placeholders for where I should load in the texture, which is right in the center of the inventory box. And each of these just has the same script, which just has one exported variable is filled. And we'll see how that plays in the inventory script. But basically, that's just to denote whether or not it has an item in it. So if we go to our script, you can see that I'm preloading a scene where I actually have the test tube, its sprite, and some code relating to it itself. And I was trying to load it directly as an image, but I realized you can't do that in Godot. You have to make a separate scene with a texture in it to have it work. And then we have 3 more variables here. This one is just to check if the protagonist is carrying the test tube. This one is to store which of these controls, so which of the inventory boxes actually has a test tube. And then this is just the variable that I'm declaring here to be able to use it in all my functions. That will be where I instance this preloaded scene. So if we go to our process, basically I'm storing the test tube count in a singleton. So if the test tube count is above 0 and we don't already have a test tube, instance a test tube, and now has test tube equals true. Otherwise, if we have a test tube already and now our test tube count has gone to 0, get rid of that test tube and has test tube will equal false. And then this add test tube function, what it does is it creates an instance of our test tube scene that we've already preloaded, and then it loops through all of these grid container control nodes, and then it checks if the grid container control child isn't filled. So if is filled equals false, then we want to add the test tube to that and store where the test tube is stored. And it'll do that for the first one it finds that isn't filled yet, and then it'll return. So the for loop will stop. And then for the test tube item itself, basically I have a texture rect with the sprite in it. And I don't have the texture rect as the parent of the scene because when I was moving around the texture rect, I wanted more like specific, like I wanted to do like decimals to get the positioning right in the control. So I ended up having to do a node 2D. I'm not exactly sure why you can do like decimal positioning on node 2D and not on canvas nodes, but that's just how Godot works, I guess. And then I have this control box which surrounds the texture. And the reason I have done this isn't just to position this the number label that keeps track of how many test tubes you have on the screen, but it's also because this is where I'm connecting in my code the mouse entered and mouse exited signals, because if it was just on the texture, because when I instance it, I'm scaling up the inventory, it would scale the texture box way too big, and it would like pop up with the this and this label in the wrong place altogether. So I have a much smaller control box to be the actual area where your mouse enters and those texts pop up. And then, as you can see, I'm connecting those signals from this control to these two functions, which basically just make the text visible and invisible, this text, which to hover over. And then, as you can see in our process, basically we're constantly setting this label's text, the number, to be the tube count set to a string. And then if our tube count is greater than 1, we want that to be visible. And I actually realized just now that we want to check that if the tube count equals 1, then that goes away, because you don't it's just 1, so you don't need a number. If we go back to our scene, you can see that everything is doing that basically we have the hover over with that control box that pops up that label. We've instanced this, and I can get more, and then it'll load it. And then if I get rid of it, so if I throw it, the text will go away once you've done it. And now you just hover over, and yeah, and you can eliminate the inventory by pressing escape and then load it, and then so that's really all there is to it. And just to show that the way I've done the for loop will actually control, like, once we have more items, the thing will go into its right box when you load, for example. Because I've exported the variable, I can set like a couple of these control nodes of the boxes to be filled just on starting, just to check. And then if we load our scene again, as you can see, empty inventory, and then I go here and I get a test tube, and it's loaded into the right box, and the text still pops up, and if I get more, the number will pop back up. And that's all because all of that is stored in the test tube instance scene. So all of that is local to the test tube. So it'll just move around to each of the control nodes that we've established, and still maintain all of this in the right position. And right now there are only 8 boxes. That might increase, but it wouldn't be too hard to do that at all because of the code that we have right now. So yeah, that's our basic inventory system. We might add more to it as we move forward, but right now I'm pretty happy with how it works. Thanks so much for tuning in, and hopefully there'll be another video in the next couple of days talking about some other changes. If you like this video and want to see more, please subscribe.